Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons where we take a darker tone with some of the subclasses and some of the theories we come up with. If you like what we do here, please like, share, subscribe. Please keep commenting. The best thing about this channel is being able to talk to people about their characters, some of the concepts they've come up with, and some of the incredible things they've been able to do in game, and some awesome things their DMs have allowed. So, without any more preamble, we're going to jump right into this week's video, the Nature Domain Cleric. The Nature Domain Cleric comes to us from the Player's Handbook. It is one of the original subclasses available to the Cleric, and because it is nature, there's going to be a lot of themes that feel really aligned with the Druid, and the best way to keep those things really separate is understand that as a Nature Domain Cleric, you're not tied to the world of nature, you're tied to the deities of nature. And sometimes that means you're tied to a deity that might not want civilization to encroach upon the forests. And it does give leeway to give you a few more options to be anti the world as it grows and try and revert things back to the way it was. Which is a great concept that I think is really, really important when trying to deviate from the overwhelming good personality traits that a nature druid would traditionally have. Doing so will give you this great availability to go into slightly more variations of alignment. The Nature Domain Cleric has a couple of good spells on its domain list, and I really wanted to bring that out because I think it's never said enough how awesome of a spell Spike Growth is, and you get that at 3rd level as a Nature Domain Cleric. It is awesome because enemies will have to traverse this area and they will take additional damage for it, and there is no save. They just take that damage. If you are with a party that happens to have abilities that move enemies, it is very, very good to throw this down immediately, because things like Repelling Blast or Infest, the cantrip, or anything else that moves a creature any amount of feet is gonna be awesome, because you can push them further and further back, and they'll have to recover that distance as well as take that damage once they get forcibly moved into those areas. It is great. If you're able to throw it down before enemies are able to charge you, it is even better. It is a great spell to have out, and you should really try and use it at all times unless you need something with your concentration. The second thing I really want to bring up is Insect Plague. I love this spell. It is just a great thematic spell of just forcing a swarm of locusts just to fly around and almost consume everything in sight. It creates obscurity so enemies can't see you clearly, and it makes it harder for them to know which direction to go because of that. So it's an awesome way to deter lesser intelligent creatures if your DM plays them in that kind of a manner. Plus, it's a big AoE and it does piercing damage, and it's an incredible boon to be scary and to throw insects all over the place to harm and terrify innocent people, as well as whatever enemies might be in your way. At 1st level, you gain access to bonus proficiencies. These proficiencies that you gain is for heavy armor, which means you can be exceptionally tanky. I really have a grave appreciation for the cleric spell list. There is a lot of incredible spells on that list. It's unfortunate that most of the time clerics get held in a scenario where they don't get the ability to use them because they get pigeonholed into picking only supporting and healing spells. I'm not that player. I am not a support player. I don't like playing healers. It is not for me. I don't enjoy it. It's not something joyful for me. That being said, make sure you talk to your party and feel free to dive into some of those spells, because with heavy armor proficiency, you'll be able to jump in the fray and not get hit often, and maybe take some of those damaging spells and really bring them to the forefront and show the absolute devastation that's available to you as a cleric. Don't shy away from getting in the mix, because there's a lot of good things that you'll be able to get for it, and this particular class, this subclass, is really geared towards doing some things I think a little bit in melee combat, and I'll explain to that with our next ability. The final first level ability you gain is Acolyte of Nature. You learn one cantrip of your choice from the Druid spell list. This cantrip counts as a cleric cantrip for you, but it does not count against the number of cleric cantrips you know. You also gain proficiency in one of the following skills of your choice: animal handling, nature, or survival. There's a couple of things to note about this ability. I think it's very deceptive on what its impact is on your nature domain cleric. The reason being, I think this is the reason why you don't gain martial weapon proficiency. I think the intent here is for you to pick up shillelagh so you can use your club or your quarterstaff and turn that into your weapon using your wisdom modifier. Which I think makes sense given some of the abilities you get later on and some of the things you can do in close combat with a cleric, like Spirit Guardians and Spirit Shroud, things like that that can really boost you up. It's interesting, and I think that's really the intent here. One of the things that I think is most important about this ability is the impact that skill proficiencies have. When I thought about a cleric and whether or not I really wanted to be one or what was going to drive my cleric character, I kept coming up with this concept of a reactionary hero, where something happens and then the hero comes up and does something. I think clerics tend to fall into that scenario because you're either following your deity's wishes and going out into the world doing whatever it is that you were told, or you just happen to be a good do-gooder in an area and something bad happens, so you stepped up. Not a terrible thing, but I had such difficulty making my own nature domain cleric. And then I looked at survival, and then I thought, what if my cleric was like a hunter? Like, what if my cleric lived out in the woods for a great portion of their time, and their temple or church was in the woods? And what if they were deceived by their deity? What if it was a fae impersonating their deity that tricked them into pursuing these strange goals? And now you have this nature domain cleric attacking and hunting out things that are out there in the world, trying to expand, trying to do the right things, maybe even following the same deity, and just destroying them and going out and pursuing them, going them into cities, tracking them, and using survival to find out where they are, find out where they normally go, and then attack. And now I have a different cleric than I've ever seen before, because I have a cleric that has this great possibility. Because what if throughout their journey they realize they're wrong, that their deity is wrong, that they're being tricked, and they find their way to their true deity, and they have to make amends, and they hate the circumstances that have happened to them, and so it drives this very cruel nature to their character as they try to redeem themselves to the god that they thought that they were serving the whole time. I like that. I think that gives a lot of new avenues to explore as a cleric, and I got all of that from just really taking the time out to consider the importance of a skill proficiency as opposed to just taking skills I know I would use. At second level, you gain access to your channel, divinity, charm, animals, and plants. As an action, you present your holy symbol to invoke the name of your deity. Each beast or plant creature that you can see within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw. If the creature fails its saving throw, it is charmed by you for a minute or until it takes damage. While charmed by you, it is friendly to you and other creatures you designate. Understand that looking at this ability, it seems very impressive early on. The reason why I say this is you tend to go do a lot of forest adventuring very early on in your levels. As you get into higher levels, very rarely are you going to play in games where people are choosing to use animals and plants as opposed to fiends or undead or Yugoloths, mind flayers, things like that. Like, it's very rare that you end up in games that use a lot of animals as enemies and plant monsters. I think some plant monsters are cool, but it's very rare. So this ability, as much as I'd love to say it's awesome, it really doesn't do much for me. I'd rather use channel divinity in order to turn undead or destroy undead when it gets up to that kind of a level. This really kind of makes me feel like a Disney princess that you're just singing and all of a sudden all these animals come out and they love you. You can use this offensively or really in a utility kind of a manner if you happen to use these to scout out areas for you or to cause a distraction. Maybe you're about to enter a cave and you just happen to come across a couple of squirrels and birds and whatever, and you have them just run in and cause chaos and run back out. It might change things up. It might be an interesting new concept, but ultimately this ability, to me, it's almost like it doesn't even exist. I'd much rather stick with the traditional undead anti-channel divinity as opposed to just this, unless you happen to be in a very particular scenario. But if you don't like it, I get it. I don't like it either. At 6th level, you gain access to Dampen Elements. When you or a creature within 30 feet of you takes acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage, you can use your reaction to grant resistance to the creature against that instance of damage. This is an incredible defensive ability. This gives you a great reason to get up into the melee area with wizards, other casters, or monsters that you might have the experience and knowledge to know that they deal these kinds of damage types. There is no cap on how many times you can use this. It takes your reaction, but you're not really doing too much with your reaction as a cleric unless you happen to get warcaster or particularly some sort of really important circumstance to make you use your reaction more often. Very rarely are you going to be running up into a scenario where you need to get those opportunity strikes that badly that you would substitute this incredible defensive buff. Also, think about how that really makes your character seem. You're wearing heavy armor, you do have the AC because of that, you can wield a shield, and now you're resistant to these kinds of elemental damage once per turn. That really should increase your survivability and give you this real purpose to be a little bit braver, a little bit more antagonistic with being up in front and in melee combat. And those kinds of things are great to reinforce who your cleric is. At 8th level, you gain access to Divine Strike. You gain the ability to infuse your weapon strikes with divine energy. Once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can cause the attack to deal an extra 1d8 cold, fire, or lightning damage, your choice, to the target. When you reach level 14, the extra damage increases to 2d8. This is the reasoning why I think they wanted you to take Shillelagh. This gives you the ability to use your melee weapon attacks in a reason that works for you. You don't have to worry about boosting up strength and dexterity as well. You can kind of mainly just focus on wisdom and compensate for that. This is a great way to keep your damage up and keep you competitive with some of the other classes. Again, you're not going to out DPS a fighter or a barbarian, but if you're low on spell slots and someone else needs to step up and you need to take that frontline initiative so that way somebody else can make it, this is a great way to complement that, to make your character feel a good reason to be up there and utilize that. If you are interested in doing more, you can do great things by picking up a couple extra feats. Maybe you pick up dueling, the fighting style, so that way that 1d8 now does 1d8 plus 2 plus whatever, so it feels like you're wielding a two-handed weapon. Or maybe you'll use something like dual wielding or something crazy, something to compensate an extra attack or anything in order to boost your damage up. But this is really just meant to keep you relevant in that regard. I like the idea of running up and clubbing something once and then doing all this additional damage, because you'll always do 2d8 plus your ability modifier. So at this point, say it's 5, you are rocking out 2d8 plus 5, which isn't so bad. But again, this is not your main focus. You are a full caster. You are a cleric. Throw on spiritual weapon. Throw on spirit shroud, spirit guardians, and just decimate everything around you. And understand this is a great reason to keep you in melee while those things are going on, and not just focus on just this ability at level 8. At 17th level, the final ability you gain as a nature domain cleric is Master of Nature. You gain the ability to command animals and plant creatures. While creatures are charmed by your charm animals and plants feature, you can take a bonus action on your turn to verbally command what each of those creatures will do on its next turn. I do not like this ability because it's too reliant on an ability you will never use. I would really need to find a way to make this viable, and it's practically impossible. Unless you happen to be a nature domain cleric fighting a whole bunch of evil druids, it's probably never going to happen. It's just too rare of a scenario to really use, and it's such a rarity to really go forward with. I would definitely talk to my DM about doing something else with this ability, or maybe just giving me something not even related to this and substituting it for something else. As Master of Nature, it really just doesn't feel complementary to anything that you're doing. It just feels like an obscure ability, and I'm sorry, I wish I could love it, but Channel Divinity at level 17 just to give a bonus action to control animals is a little underpowered, useless in my mind realistically, and I hate to say that about an ability, but I can't find a way to plausibly use this. Our final thoughts. The Nature Domain Cleric is a very interesting cleric. It's a little harder to use and build a concept around that doesn't feel like a druid. That being said, the spell list of the cleric is really what gives you the full baseline power of the cleric. And clerics are powerful. I can't tell you enough. Knowing that spell list and reminding yourself that you are a full spellcaster is what's going to make this character shine. Using creative ways, you can make this still a melee spellcaster. Spiritual weapons, spirit shrouds, spirit guardians, that'll keep you in melee, destroying everything around you. You can throw in insect plague if you wanted to play more of a dynamic nature domain cleric, or if you're playing with Tasha's rules, you can switch out Divine Strike for potent cantrips and make your wisdom modifier add on to your cantrips, and then you can grab something like Thorn Whip and really drag people around spike growth. There's a lot of great things you can do with this subclass. Channel Divinity sucks, I'm sorry. Dampen Elements, awesome. If you're playing a low level campaign, this is where this domain is really going to shine. High level, I'm sorry, you just can't do anything about that Channel Divinity. I'm sorry, it sucks. I really wish you could be great, but there's only so much we can do. That being said, we're going to bring this video to a close. Thank you so much if you stuck through the whole thing. Please like, share, subscribe. Please keep commenting. We absolutely love to hear from you guys. And above all, thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.